Hi, and welcome to another episode of If It's in the Mind, It Can Be Managed, the Mind Management Mentors podcast. And today we're going to be talking about, and I'm actually, when you just gave that little bit of a little hint of what we're going to talk about, I'm like, this is perfect. This is everything that priority mind management is about, especially in the workplace and things like that. So, Adina, that's an outstanding topic we're going to talk about today. So, for anybody that's just tuning in, obviously, as always, like and subscribe, join the movement that we are creating at Mind Management Mentors Podcast. We genuinely believe there's a solution for everything with the mind management. Anything that's in the mind can be managed. There is no need for people to genuinely go around struggling for years with their mental health, their mindset. We've got answers for absolutely everything. There will be somebody out there in the world that will have the solution that you're looking for. And I believe Adina is going to be one of those things. So Adina, hi and welcome, Chifach.
Hello, Binefak to Chefach. Thank you for having me, and hello, everybody. It's great to be here.
You are a Romanian originally.
Yes, that's right.
That's the reason I said Chefach. I only know Chefach in Romanian and Fakbini in Romanian. That's the only words that I know, so I do apologize. You are based in the Netherlands now?
Yes, that's right. I've been living the expat life now for almost 15 years. I realize this year it's going to be my 15th since I immigrated in the Netherlands.
And what is it about the Netherlands that you like?
It's not the weather, that's for sure.
Not be the same as the UK, really. It's a little bit rainy and cold in the winter, right?
Just about 9 months a year, yes.
Wow. Right, okay, fair enough.
Yeah. So no, not the weather. I think it's the people, honestly. I love the fact that the Netherlands is a very multicultural place. I like the fact that the Dutch culture is pretty laid back, especially down south where I live. People enjoy their lives, enjoy taking their time, doing, interesting activities, being a little bit more relaxed about things. And this
Is
was
that
a
because
very
weed is legal in the Netherlands?
I'm pretty sure that contributes to it. I'm absolutely certain of it. I think their open-mindedness and capacity for tolerance of diversity makes it possible for people to have a good time in the Netherlands.
Oh, fantastic. I love that. That's I didn't want to overgeneralize. I've been to Amsterdam, and to be fair, my wife enjoyed it more than I did. And I didn't want to overgeneralize that obviously everybody in the Netherlands is smoking weed, but at the same time, there probably is a higher percentage of people in the Netherlands smoking weed because it's legal, right?
Could be. I haven't actually looked at the statistics, but this is something that I actually found interesting. When I relocated here, having, of course, the same assumptions,
Yeah.
I found out that actually the locals are over the weed consumption stage
Yeah.
around the teenage times because they have it, because it's so accessible. Around the age of 15, everybody's like, oh, I've been there, done that. Now I can get my life together and it's fine. So when you come here later in life as a 20-year-old or something and you're smoking weed, people are looking at you as, oh my God, you're so childish. So that was super interesting.
Oh, fantastic. Right. I love that. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Adina. Tell us exactly what you do, because it was I'm going to let you rattle it off actually, because I thought it's definitely in the ballpark of what I do, and I love that. I love us meeting each other on the same level.
Likewise.
Tell us about what you are, what you've done, and how you've trained.
Sure. So my background is in clinical psychology. This means that I have a bachelor's and a master's in psychology. The clinical part is that part in which technically I should be working in an institution diagnosing people and making them treatment compliant. But I exited that setting.
I love it. Right, stay there. Before we go any further, treatment compliant. What was that? Tell me what that is, because I've got a feeling we might change completely the direction. Treatment compliant. What does that mean?
Yeah. That technically means that in a clinical setting, the role of a clinical psychologist is to be an intermediary between the psychiatrist who is prescribing the medication of a patient and the patient plus their family. So my role as a clinical psychologist would have been basically to explain the patients and their families how to be treatment compliant, how to take their medicine, and how to basically never dig the root causes of their mental health issues.
Oh, Oh, whoever sent you to me was an absolute. This is going to be a gift. I've been very open and honest that I think that I do have a personal bias, and I have to make sure that I'm very honest about that personal bias.
Sure.
My personal bias is I don't think you need medication for a lot of mental health, and I think there's things we can do, the root cause, to help people. And I know there's different levels of like going from psychosis to mental health to mental illness. Completely understand. I'm a
Yes.
big believer in depression, stress, and anxiety is emotional health, and
Sure.
it's an emotion that we can work with without tablets. So I love the fact that you went for that, Adina. Brilliant, fantastic.
Yeah,
So
that was not
why
easy
did you
for me.
move away from it?
It wasn't easy for me. Technically, because I was very curious, to be fair. When I was doing my clinical rotations as a student, I was the odd one that really liked to stay with a patient and linger and just ask them questions and listen to their story. And I often found myself walking out of a clinical setting thinking, my God, if some of that would have happened to me, I would have been locked up here, but I'm not crazy. So what's going on? And that was a bit my curiosity leading me a little bit away from this classic pathologizing standardized model in which we judge and evaluate people by a set number of symptoms and asking the question, but why? Why did this person have a mental breakdown? Why did this person down spiraled into a psychosis? Why are some people treatment resistant for depression? If the treatment is so good, why isn't it working? So these kind of questions got me in trouble. I was the troublemaker student who always has the why questions. And that led me to discover the world of psychological trauma back in the day when it was not a buzzword.
It is. Oh, by the way, Dean, I love the fact that you said it's a buzzword. There is a lot of things that are buzzwords right now, which is that I would suggest into the realm of ADHD is a buzzword.
Yep.
And it's funny because we'll all have been brought up different ways, but I remember that I'm not saying it's an excuse because I'm fully aware of mental health and emotional health, and ADHD is a thing. But I'm also very hesitant that if there's a tablet at the end of the diagnosis, should we look at different options before we go down that route, which kind of sounds like that's what you were doing.
I am cautious about this. First of all, because full disclaimer here, I'm also very open and honest. I am a person with diagnosed ADHD and medication route after a while. So in that respect, I do believe that when people, generically speaking, when they have concerns about their mental health, about their emotional well-being, I do believe it is the responsible thing to try to figure out what's going on. So sleeping over it or shoving it under the carpet, we know already from the previous generations that doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
So addressing it in a safe environment, I feel is the responsible thing to do. But I also believe that people should have more access to education to make informed decisions about their own health. Because I believe that by respecting people's autonomy and encouraging them to be co-partners in their treatment plan, the chances of success are higher. So if a client or a patient has concerns about medication, I would love it if the medical staff would sit down with them and listen to their concerns and try to alleviate them and give them alternatives instead of trying to dismiss them, minimize their concerns, and just make them treatment compliant. That's something that I'm actually currently working on, and hopefully it's gonna start changing soon.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. I love that. So this comes from a judgment and a bias from childhood. But there's two things I wanted to touch on from what you said there. Is first of all, as a clinical psychologist, you might be able to answer this one. But before we go into that, the precursor to that was there's always been something in our history, in our time, a reason to not do something or an excuse. Way back in the day, it was bad back. There was no proof whether you had a bad back or not, but you would be signed off the sick, or I've got a bad back. You got the doctors and you'd be signed off and you get a bad back. Bad back kind of moved into seeming to be stress. Stress moved into mental health. Now mental health seems to have moved into like the ADHD era. Again, I'm not saying the ADHD. I am not diagnosed, but there is no doubt in my mind I am not ADHD.
Sure.
Which brings me to the actual part, which is, why is it people are so quick to say, I have that, without fully getting diagnosed, without fully going through a situation when things pop up? Let's use TikTok as an example, and I'm on TikTok and things like that, and I see, oh, if you have, I was kind of thinking I'd got a kidney disease because I had all these symptoms, and this one guy was saying, if you've got these symptoms, you might have a kidney disease, and I'm like, oh, I've got all those symptoms. I've got it. Turns out I got a gluten intolerance. It wasn't even. But I was like, I've got that, and that. Oh, it's probably going to be a kidney disease. So I went for a test of kidney. No, there's nothing wrong with your kidney. You're absolutely fine. I'm like, are you serious? But why is it, are we so quick to go, I have that? And we can, because we're going to move into the trauma of like PTSD, complete CPTSD. We're going to talk about that because that's a lot of my clients as well.
Sure.
Why is it we're so quick? Is there a psychology part of this why we're so quick to go, I have that ADHD, I have those symptoms, I have restless leg, I have an internal chatter in a conversation that's really negative and really loud? Why is it we're so quick to go, I have that?
I think it's our human nature. I think it's very, very difficult for us to sit and live with the uncertainty. And I think in a way it's psychological, and I also feel it's a little bit philosophical. I think living with uncertainty is so paralyzing and so mortifying than the quest for answers and certainty. Even if that certainty is a bad news type of diagnosis, it's still better than not knowing. Because this living with uncertainty, I believe it's absolutely terrifying and mostly impossible for us. We need a reason. We need an explanation. We need to make sense of our inner world, our symptoms, our outer world, our experiences. And I do believe that this is what people are looking for when they go in search for whatever diagnosis or whatever explanation of their symptoms.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. And while you're talking about that, the uncertainty, the part of uncertainty, we don't want the uncertainty. Is that not an emotional need from Maslow's emotional hierarchy of needs? Is certainty and security. Certainty and security is one of the basic needs in life that we have for our emotional needs, which is certainty. And if we get certainty took away from us, or our safety took away from us, we will have that break, that psychological break, or that trauma within our life as the perception of what we were supposed to have and didn't get, and that's the break in the psyche, right?
Yes. Basically, I would say the secret lies in our nervous system. If you know a little bit of anatomy, how our central nervous system functions through this vagus nerve, the polyvagal theory I'm referring to here of Stephen Porges, it's really this constant monitoring of our internal state and our external reality to make sure that we are safe and that we're going to survive because life just wants to live. So as living entities, we're really just concerned with our survival. So when something goes inside of us, when we have a symptom, when we have a certain disorder, when we're noticing a dysregulation in our functionality, I feel it's natural for us to have a little bit of curiosity about what's going on and not, as I said earlier, try to neglect it or sleep it off, because we know now from previous generations that doesn't really work for us. So the responsible thing is, of course, to try to look for answers of what's going on with me health-wise.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much. Right, so we are gonna, that's the polyfagal theory from Stephen. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've got that in one of my courses actually. We talk about that, we deep dive that, but it is just a theory, and that's the thing with the theory is not fact. It's a theory that they're still trying to prove. I do believe with the polyfagal theory.
Yeah, they are doing a lot of research on it. Actually, it started about 20 years ago. I think it only just became popular recently. And there are now some somatic practices which are helping us regulate emotionally our nervous system states. And these, I think, are becoming more and more known to people. And there are a lot of practitioners who are very well trauma informed and can help people and support them, at least in getting to know themselves a little bit better and understanding their functionality, offering them little tools that they can apply on themselves to, calm down their nervous system and then have access to the prefrontal cortex where the thinking happens, rather than being overwhelmed by everything that the amygdala is trying to dictate in a heightened state of emotional imbalance.
As amazing as the amygdala is, it's a bit of an arsehole, isn't it? Let's be honest.
I mean,
it's a predated system that used to keep us safe from dinosaurs. The amygdala is constantly firing off.
I was about to say, I tend to look at the amygdala as a small child who doesn't yet have language and therefore only express itself through crying. So,
literally, the amygdala is that part of the brain that, it's literally, it's not processed, it's not grown with the rest of our body.
No.
It's that base. Really unbelievable. And oh my god, I love it. Adina, thank you so much. This is brilliant. I love it. I love meeting people where I can have these conversations with, because when I have these conversations with other people about the amygdala, about the response, they just look at me like, the fuck are you talking about? I'm like, no, but I do. If once we understand the processes that we go through, and even this, and I always talk about this, but even like the biology of a belief can have this massive impact on our life. Anyway, I've got a feeling you'll be back on for another podcast. You're all right, Adina. Right, so let's talk about Adina as you are a high performance coach, but you are also a trauma informed coach. And I think you've got to be trauma informed as a coach these days, because it does absolutely play havoc with your entire body somatically as well. So that brilliant, fantastic stuff. So as a high performance coach, who do you work with?
I do several things, actually. So as a high performance coach, for example, I have now an active collaboration with Maastricht University, Maastricht being the little city in the south of the Netherlands where I currently reside. And with them, I do two things. One of them is I do trauma-informed education for academic staff, because they realize that if their students are struggling mental health-wise, their academic staff is not educated to handle that. And that's where I intervene to give them a little bit of knowledge and skill, let's say, to at least identify when that's the case, so they can then direct the students to getting proper help, because I don't think that academic staff should be playing the role of a therapist, but they should know enough to recognize when this is needed. So that's one thing that I do. And the second thing, I'm actually very, very pleased and happy that this summer we will have the first bachelor students from the Faculty of Medicine that will be graduating with trauma-informed knowledge because of me. So I had the idea that medical professionals should be trauma-informed, because surprise, they're not. And this was something for me that was like, what do you mean they're not? And this is something that it was like a personal mission of mine, for my own personal reasons, that I really wanted to go into the university and plug trauma knowledge into future medical professionals, so that I can be reassured when I'm an old woman, some doctors will know how to better take care of me.
That's absolutely fantastic. And what we said we were going to talk about today, because we think it's a fascinating subject, and I do, because this is generally one of the passions that I have, is getting into the workplace and getting that training in there. I've got a training called SLAP training. And I always ask people, if you could slap your staff for positive mental health, would you do it? And everyone's like, oh my God, I would slap them on a daily basis. So if you can understand the story that we tell, the language, the association, and the physicality, you'll start understanding emotional wellness and mental health a hell of a lot better. So it's a training for the entire business. But you talked about a lot of your clients are actually coming from, they paid for that private attention, that private care with you, because they're getting stressed out at work. And so talk to me about that, because that's a really powerful part.
Yes. So I really, really like working at this cross sector between psychology and business. And this was a stream of individual clients in the one-on-one setting that have been coming for my services. These people are usually high-performing people in top management, people that are running biggest companies that we have in this region. And because my business runs fully online, I actually have clients on 3 continents. So they don't necessarily have to be local, right? These people want to do high performance, And sometimes either they have trauma in their history, so they are battling the internal barriers that brings, so they can't perform as well as they want to, or they are stuck in organizations where the culture tends to be a little bit toxic, and by a little bit I mean a lot.
So I want us to really deep dive this as well, actually.
Sure.
Because where does that toxicity? I've worked with some businesses that don't have a toxic work culture, but there would still be some. Do you know? I always have to give props to Royal Caribbean. Royal Caribbean was a great company to work for. I worked for them for 13 years, and there would be some people say this is so toxic, and there'd be some it's not toxic. So where does the understand? Does that not come from a place of projection? If somebody's got that toxicity inside, do they not put that into the world and go, "This is a toxic workplace"?
I'm not entirely sure it's projection. My understanding so far is that is more in the subconscious dynamics that are at play. Yeah. Because when we look at trauma in the terrain of trauma, there are two things I want to bring up here. One is the transgenerational component of trauma, which everybody in the world has one ancestor at least that has gone through some very severe traumatic experiences. And the second bit is that trauma travels through generations or is being passed down from one generation to another through sets of beliefs and behaviors, primarily through a relationship dynamic, which we call the victim-perpetrator dynamic.
Right. Bang on. Yes.
And this is what I see in toxic work cultures. They have a prevalence of this victim-perpetrator dynamic that is pervasive throughout the organization. And it goes primarily into the old school hierarchical models. I don't know if you remember, it was one of those, it was a comic from, I think it was from the offices of the 90s, where there is a pole of eagles or crows, I don't remember what bird, and they're all lined up like a pyramid, the one at the top and then two at the branches, and basically the one at the top is, discharging poop on top of everybody else.
So it's the monkey tree. It's the monkey at the top. When you're looking up, all you get is shit coming down. Right. Yes.
Yeah, basically. I saw it in Romania. It was popular. I saw it in my parents' office. I remember this visual because it was so shocking. But the bottom were many, I think there were birds. I don't remember which kind, right? They were covered in shit, basically. Yeah. And the guy at the top was the only one who was clean, So I think as graphic as this example might be, I really think this is a good way to understand this hierarchical trauma dynamic in which people at the top end up becoming abusers to the people who are under them. And I believe that for the past couple of years, at least these new up-and-coming generations are really trying to dismantle that type of hierarchical construction, especially in the workplace, because it becomes so toxic. And it impacts people's mental health. It impacts their relationships with their families when they come home from work and they're very stressed because they've been abused by somebody at work. That has a huge impact on their physical health through somatic responses in their body, in the relationship that they have with their spouses and with their children, because they don't know how to regulate themselves enough, so they don't bring that thing home. And they're stuck in feeling helpless. Usually this is what we see in companies on the floor, on the worker bee front. Everybody can see and notices that these things are happening, but they're helpless in changing them. And that's my belief, is that change can happen from the top. So
the fish rots from the top, the fish rots from the head.
Exactly. And that's why I like to work with these managers and these company directors, because the moment they start working on their own trauma and they start understanding how they have been victimized in their upbringing, how they are unknowingly and unwillingly, so there is no intention there, but the subconscious mind has these power dynamics at play. And the moment that they understand this and they can connect with themselves in a more compassionate way and get over their scars, basically, that's when you start seeing the shift in the way they do work as well. And that's when they start becoming more trusting that by empowering the middle management, by giving them and stimulating their autonomy, they just create a healthier workplace. Because That's how we should be. Autonomous, healthy individuals, not codependent, not fearing repercussions, not operating in this hypervigilant stance that sometimes our nervous system gets triggered in.
So when you're talking about the codependency, technically we're talking about the actual CEO being codependent on everybody else. The codependence is if I don't relinquish my control of what I'm doing, so the actual CEO or the business owner needs the people below him more than he actually, he or she possibly understands that they need.
Yes, a famous Romanian saying goes about like, if you want to be king in the land with no inhabitants, who are you king of? So basically, if you're a CEO and you're isolated from the rest of your organization or your upper management and you don't have a connection with the people that are working for you in teams, who are you managing? Who are you the director of? So I feel like this is why it's so important to healthify these connections and these relationships, because not everybody wants their job. This is something that a lot of people, I feel, are afraid of. In upper management, the genuine fear is that if I trust them and bring them on board, they're going to push me out. They're going to steal my job. But not everybody wants that. Some people are genuinely happy to just work and not be the boss or to be in charge. Or the majority of people actually are very content with just having a nice place to work in.
It's one of those things that somewhere along the journey. So I made it quite high up at Royal Caribbean. I got to cruise director, was in charge of the entertainment of the ship. So I worked with the hotel director and the captain. Huh? And somewhere on the journey of learning leadership, I did learn that I didn't want most people had gotten into their positions of power probably by doing something shitty to somebody else.
Yeah.
So that when you get sat in that position, you are then sat looking, right, is that person going to do the same to me? Is that person? So you're sat in this place of hypervigilance, miserable because you've done bad shit to get because you believed you needed to get to do the bad shit to get you. And then you're looking, is that person going to do the same thing to me? Is that person? So you get to this position, then you're like, that's when the entire nervous system will crash and it'll just burn out because you are constantly trying to control everything. And I remember that, and the reason I remember that is I had an opportunity to do something untowards to somebody I actually particularly didn't like, to be fair, and I turned the opportunity down. And they asked me, like, well, you've got a really good chance to get promoted, and to also get this person at the Royal Caribbean. And I sat there and went, I know that eventually I will become a cruise director, and I cannot be sat in that chair thinking, will that person do the same to me? But that came down to values and integrity. And somebody actually did say, my God, you had a great opportunity. And I'm like, my opportunity might happen in 2-3 years' time. Yes. I'm not going to go against my values.
Yes. And that's very honorable of you. Some people don't have that level of self-awareness, and sometimes they will just do it because they feel they have no other choice. And
I had to go through a lot of work to get that self-awareness.
Yeah, exactly. So other people, what I've noticed is that they don't have the self-reflected nature, so they don't see it, or they have no idea what the prize actually entails. Yeah. So they're fighting to get to the top, only to realize they're super unhappy about it, because actually they hate the responsibility, they don't like the pressure, they seriously dislike being center stage, or they feel very uncomfortable under the radar and so on. So they hate it, they absolutely hate it, but they've never really contemplated it before getting there. And this is again where the subconscious mind comes to play, because if you're operating from a place of, for example, subconsciously trying to fulfill the expectations of your parents about becoming the leader because they were subconsciously priming you for that, but that's not your dream, that's not your goal, that's not your ambition, you'll do it because you're a hardworking person, and when you get there, you will collapse, and that's when you call me. And you're going to start asking the questions, why am I in this mess? What's going on with my life? I'm having a crisis, help, right? So these are some things which I feel a lot of people could benefit from before getting into the woods of everything.
Absolutely. And we just going back a little bit before we move forward and things like of how we can implement better workplaces, and it was the victim and the perpetrator. Now, if I don't, when we go on this journey of learning, there's so many things we're taking, but is there not a triangle of three, which is the victim, the perpetrator, and the hero?
Sure.
There is, right?
Yes, absolutely.
I know I play the hero an awful lot. I genuinely am like, let me see if I can save everyone. I'm like, nah, we just.
I was about to say,
I have to slap it out and make no. I'm like, I know I play the hero an awful lot in my own world. But explain that triangle a little bit more and the concept behind that, the victim, the perpetrator, and the hero. Because to be fair, I understand perpetrators being popular.
Yeah. So in trauma therapy, we call that the third one, we call him the savior, not necessarily the hero. Yeah. And what's super interesting is that in the triangle model that you are referencing, the victim is the one at the top, and then the perpetrator and the savior are the two of them at the bottom. So then if we split this image in half, we notice that the two at the bottom are together on the same plane of existence for a very simple reason, that neither one of them are taking into account the victim's autonomy. And I feel this is also a sort of, let's say, subconscious mistake that people are doing. When they're jumping in to be the savior of somebody, they are not respecting their autonomy. Because oftentimes victims don't ask for help. It's us who jump in to say, oh my God, you're doing it wrong. Let me help you, stop you right there. But this is not empowering. More often than not, it's actually enabling. So it's that famous internet quote thingy, teach them to fish, don't give them fish, basically. Because when you truly want to save somebody, all you have to do is create the environment for them to save themselves, actually. And this is also a correction that I want to bring in this dialogue, because a lot of people come to me and they say, oh my God, you saved my life, or I'm here for you to save me. And I'm like, no. We are not in the business of saving. No. If you want a therapist that saves you, please go find somebody else. This is not who I am. I am not that kind of coach. I am not that kind of therapist, but I will create the proper environment for you to save yourself. And that is actual stimulation of your autonomy. Because I feel it's in our nature to be healthy, resilient, autonomous individuals. And because of trauma, those little bits were taken away from us, dismantled, or suppressed. And my job is to create a safe place for my clients to regain what's rightfully theirs.
Yeah. Where does narcissism play on this as well?
Well,
I know it's not what we were going to talk about, but
that's perfectly fine.
We talked about self-reflection, and I know I have a lot of self-reflection, so I know I'm not a narcissist. There was a point where things were going wrong, and I'm like, am I a narcissist? But the second I asked that question, I was like, no, I'm not a narcissist.
A narcissist would never ask themselves that.
Funnily enough, the number one question I asked my clients before coming on now, because I had I was like, are you a narcissist? And they're like, what are you asking that question for? I'm like, are you a narcissist? Well, I've kind of thought I was, but I don't think. Perfect. That's all I need to know. That's literally the perfect answer. Because as I've said, I'm not going to work with narcissists. Just not. And believe it or not, some of them were high performers within a business structure that I had to go, this is not going to work, because I can do what I do for your staff all day long, but until you change, none of this is going to make any difference whatsoever. So I'm well versed in that, Adina. But the whole part that narcissism plays in leadership, does that come from a place of lack of self-reflection, or does it come from a place of fear? Or how does the narcissist get involved in that?
Well, I think we should bring some nuances to the table, because I think narcissism is a buzzword again.
It is. It's popping up everywhere. And I had to go into it. I'm like, no, but everybody has narcissistic traits.
Yes.
But not everyone's a narcissist.
No. Actually, if you look at the data from a real scientific perspective, there's only 2% maybe of the population that would have an actual narcissistic disorder. And when we say disorder, it means somebody shoved them in an MRI and noticed in their brain that their empathy center does not light up for Christmas at all. So in that respect, when we see these brain malfunctions, that's actually the correct moment to put the label of somebody being a narcissist. However, everything that we talk about in regards to mental health exists on a spectrum. So we could have narcissistic tendencies, we could have narcissistic personality, we could have narcissistic traits, or we could also have a mislabeling of a person who is now feeling that they are in their a bit of an egoistic era, and they themselves, because they feel guilty and they have this inner conflict about for the first time making themselves a priority, they would say, oh, I don't want to be a narcissist. Oh no, please no. So these are some things that I feel are important, first of all, to be nuanced. And second of all, I feel a lot of people would have the tendency to draw that conclusion because of their own insecurities. If you are projecting that somebody in a leadership position is a narcissist, it could be, I don't know, now I'm just making stuff up, right? It could be because you're envious. It could be because you yourself are insecure enough and you cannot tolerate the capacity of that person of exhibiting themselves the way.
So it comes from a place of projection.
It could come from a place of projection. So yes,
it's so easy to say everyone's a narcissist, right?
I think it's easy for a lot of people to misuse a lot of terminology that used to belong in the specialty fields, right? And that's across everything, everywhere. Nowadays, I heard somebody say the other day something like, I made a sustainable soup or something like that. And I was like, wow, like, tell me more about that. Are you generating power with it? Like, what's going on? Basically, they wanted to make a joke of the fact that they made a soup out of scraps. They were on the bottom of the fridge about to go bad. And instead of throwing them away and buying fresh veggies, they made a sustainable soup by reusing, that stuff. So I feel like language in itself, because it's alive and, it keeps changing, is really making terminology be a sort of playground for a lot of people. And in general, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because I've seen that things land in their proper place after a while. But I do feel that people could be a little bit more mindful about the intent with which they use said words and such labels. So when I have clients as well who ask themselves, right, the same question, am I a narcissist because I think about my goals all the time, or I think about this and I don't really care about the other people, or I'm so mission driven that I really want to achieve this. Does that make me a narcissist, right? And then we have to look a little bit at the intent and the background and all of those things and figure out, basically bottom line question, do you tear up a little bit when you see a suffering puppy? Because that could also help you to determine whether or not you're a narcissist, So, of course, I make a funny joke out of it, but there are many in which people can find themselves a little bit reflective. And again, I think that's healthy. I think it's healthy to question ourselves a little bit and figure out, where does my ambition come from? Is this something that I intrinsically want? Is this something that I've been groomed to grow into, like the Manchurian Candidate? Or is this something that I genuinely want for myself, and for whatever reasons you want that?
Yeah, brilliant, fantastic. Do you know what? I when I'm talking to guests and things like that, I'll always come from a place of, I meet this person on the same level, but when I'm talking to you, I'm like, this lady knows a lot more than I do, and I'm like, right, now I've got questions.
Sure,
but that actually might be a separate podcast.
Okay,
because it kind of sounds like there's more than one spectrum. Because you said that's the life on the spectrum. Because I know for a fact we're all on the spectrum, but it's not just a spectrum of autism to ADHD. When we were talking about narcissism, there's a spectrum of narcissism, and there's a spectrum of it. And I was like, how many spectrums are there that we're going to be? That'll be a powerful life on the spectrum. That'll be an extremely powerful podcast. We're going to put a pin in that one, Adina. We'll put a pin in that one. And we'll come back to that, because I'm like, now I know I can learn more, which is brilliant. I love it when something comes along and I'm like, right, now I've got something to learn. Brilliant. So let's talk about how can we. I'm passionate about it, but before we go into how we can change the emotional wellness within the business structure, There's always that clash between hitting his goals, making more money, being profitable, and actually looking towards the people. Because we at Royal Caribbean, we were always a little bit like, you're going to have to push yourself. There's going to be a time where a boss is going to say, suck it up, buttercup, this is what we're doing, right? Oh, we can't have that anymore. Well, no, actually, no, we can. I hear it a lot from the people I work with, like, I don't know how to talk to my staff anymore. At one point, I just need them to suck it up and get on with it. And I'm like, fair point. It's a fair point. Do you think, and I've wrote this down, and especially because this goes back to the beginning of the podcast where you said, do you think there's too many labels and too many diagnoses that are incorrect? Because I know the percentage of you've laughed, Adina, so I know I've hit it on the head there, right? There's so many misdiagnoses. The misdiagnosis is so high, which is because there's so many variables. And I'm a big believer in a good high percentage of most people's challenges is unresolved trauma.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, as it shows up, might be ADHD for some people. It might be, I wouldn't say autism because I know autism is a completely different side of the spectrum, but ADHD, overthinking, a lot of it could be unresolved trauma. ADHD now, I think, from what I was reading recently, is overprescribed and overdiagnosed and misdiagnosed. The percentage of ADHD misdiagnosis is in the line of 68%. 68% misdiagnosed with ADHD. Not referring to you, but other people. Then you've got like about 86% of people who are self-diagnosed with ADHD, not even gone for it. They're still walking around, because I know that the labels becomes part of identity, and identity is fucking brutal for people. And I keep talking about this. If we don't understand the power of identity,
there are a couple of things I want to say here. Number one being, we don't have a definition of normality. We do not have a clear functional definition of perfection, health, normality, and all those things. I really want people to understand this. These are concepts. They are abstract concepts. In the real life and reality of you and me and everybody else that you know, they don't exist. There is no such thing as a healthy human being. I really, really insist on this. And there is even, I don't know if it's correctly attributed to him, but Carl Gustav Jung has a quote floating on the internet saying, "Show me a healthy person and I will cure them for you." So in that respect, any single person on this planet that thinks that they are 100% healthy, they just need better doctors to investigate, because for sure on one of the spectrums, right? That's one of the things.
Honestly, by the way, I'm working on a new business project, and the entire title of it is "What is Normal?"
Yes, and Gabor Mate has an amazing book called The Myth of Normal, which he really puts in perspective how the sickening of society and cultures are a real thing, and there's no such thing as healthy. So this was also the premise with which I approached the Faculty of Medicine when I started talking to their future students, and I said, let us debunk the myth of normality and really start looking at individuals in their uniqueness, because this is exactly what I feel is the most amazing part about my work. If you can't tell by now, I'm extremely passionate about what I do.
Me too.
I love human nature, and this is exactly what I love about it. I've been working with people for the past 15 years, every single day of my life, and I am not bored, because two depressive people never look or feel the same. Two anxious people never look or feel the same. So as much as it's repetitive diagnosis-wise, the way they're uniquely impacted by that, the way they are uniquely resilient to overcome that, is so awe-inspiring that I cannot for the life of me centralize everything and say, oh, it's like this, and then be dismissive about it. So this uniqueness is something that I feel people should be a lot more in touch with. And now, tuning into the concept of identity, this is also something that led me to do trauma work, because I've noticed how the stigma, the labels, and these attributions are called in trauma therapy, they're very detrimental exactly to this unique nature of each and every one of us. When I have clients coming in and saying, I'm depressed or I'm anxious, I start correcting them gently about saying you feel depressed, you feel anxious, you are in touch with a part of yourself that is depressed or anxious. I am ADHD. And I then entertain the idea of saying, might you be neurodivergent? Because again, as a concept, that just means I'm distinct from that abstract model that only exists in the books. If you look at the Gaussian curves, that's a model. It's something that we put out there as a reference point, but it's not a real thing. It does not exist in reality. And I really would like people to know this and understand this.
It's funny. And I say that in a very weird way of how I'm taking a pause for a second for this one because I want to word this.
Sure.
So I feel like this might be a bombshell. It also might not be, Adina. It's kind of funny how people are not in that desperation to be normal.
Mm-hmm.
There's also, I'm genuinely do everything within my possibility to not be normal. I don't think normal is fun in any way. I'm 47 and I've got a mohawk.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just, it's funny how the amount of people that are so desperate to be normal, but they're constantly looking for that thing that doesn't make them normal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There is, I don't know if you remember, there was a trend on the internet at some point popularizing these demotivational posters. And one came to mind, which was with a flock of zebras, right? And the title said, conformity. When people are free to do as they please and they end up doing exactly the same thing as one another. It's one of my favorite ones, because this is exactly what we're talking here. On the one hand, there is this nature that we have. And I'm going to connect a little bit with something that you said earlier, right? About how our mental health diagnoses are probably contextual because of trauma. My belief is that there is a combined factor there. There is a genetic attribution to most of the things that we have, like seriously inheriting through our DNA. But a lot of people forget the concept of epigenetics, in which the environment that you are in will stimulate that part of your DNA or will inhibit it. So in that respect, in having the proper environment around you, you could be more stimulated to become more ADHD because your environment, for example, was so chaotic. There was so much instability in the world you grew up in that your brain created itself as an ADHD survival strategy, because ADHD actually means that your attention jumps from one thing to another really, really fast. So that's an adaptive response to your environment. Or it could be that you had such an overwhelming environment that your tiny resources, psychologically speaking, couldn't shape up, and then you became depressed. And that becomes part of your personality. But that's one thing, having your own nature in whatever specific way you are. And then comes that magical moment in which you start comparing yourself to everybody else, and you start pushing yourself in that little square of conformity when you were never made to be a square. You are, I don't know, a starfish, a little round cog, a tornado, or whatever you are. Why would you try so hard to be a square? That's something that is of course difficult for a lot of people to figure out and understand. But I do believe it's somewhat the key towards this inner sense of well-being that everybody is searching for. I think acceptance of your true nature is that. Whereas when you're trying to conform to things that don't even align with yourself internally, that's the road to unhappiness. And it's like torture, because it's slow and steady and it wears you down. And that's it doesn't give you a good quality of living. And I do believe we deserve, all of us, we deserve to have a good quality of living, a good experience in this life, because as far as we know so far, it's the only one we have. So, we might as well have an enjoyable one.
I love it. Adina, this is going to be the first of many chats. If you are open to have more conversations, this was fascinating. Absolutely
Thank
fascinating. I love how much we do. There was a vibe, Adina. There was definitely a vibe. That's all I'm going to say. There was definitely a vibe. Now, before we wrap up, because I'm very conscious of your nervous bladder, so what was? Am I allowed to ask? What was your trauma?
Yes, you are allowed to ask, of course. I don't have just one. But to put it in perspective, I was born in dictatorship, Romania, 1986. That's also the year of Chernobyl. My mother was 4 months pregnant with me when everybody in the world started thinking that the air, the water, the soil, the food can poison you, and your baby can be born with 3 arms. So that's just one of the things that I can say about my personal trauma. And I have quite a rich trauma history, partly because that was just the circumstance of my existence. Um, but in learning about myself, these things, I've constantly done the work that I needed to do in order to make sure that things are not permeable from my personal life into my work life. I still have a supervisor that I talk to make sure regularly that my mental health is pristine, because I love offering my absolute best to my clients. And when something is going on in my personal life, I have a very transparent and open relationship with everybody that I work with. And I tell them. In December, for example, my last grandparent passed away. So I had to cancel appointments, and I messaged everybody saying, hey, this has happened. I need to grieve in order to be there for you at full capacity. I'm terribly sorry for the inconvenience. If it's an emergency, I'll be happy to assist you, but I do need to take this time off. And of course, my clients are absolutely fantastic. They are amazingly humane and super understanding people. So all I got was showered with a lot of love and affection and support, which is it makes a bit my skin react, when I think about how much love there is in this very human exchange that our work entails. Because going down into the trauma of somebody, it doesn't get more intimate than that, honestly.
No, it's true. Do you identify as a coach or a therapist?
This is super interesting, actually, because I more identify as a trauma educator. It just comes out in either a therapeutic setting or a coaching setting, or in just plain educational settings, right? So I would say, if I am to take one of these labels or attributions in my profession, I think it would be a trauma educator.
A trauma educator for the high performers. Brilliant. Now, before we wrap up, do you think there is an underlying? Let me try and I need to word this better, because when we're going through things, I'm always checking in with my personal bias. Do you think there is a bias towards keeping people stuck in the victim mindset? Do you think we're creating generations of victims?
That's a loaded question.
Is it?
Yes, because it can be seen as that. If you look at the general state of the world right now, the grander political context, that's a great benefit to have a lot of victims that you can very easily manipulate. Because a victim state of being, from a psychological point of view, is generally paralyzed by fear. And when you have somebody that's paralyzed by fear, specifically in an existential trauma type of way, in which people don't know if they will have food on the table tomorrow, if they have a job security anymore, if they will be able to afford paying for their mortgage, or if they literally will not have a roof over their heads, that breeds a sort of terrain for enhanced victimology. And that makes people easily convinced and manipulated into doing things that otherwise they might not. So I feel like there is a big tendency towards that, but I'm a perpetual optimist, and more in the resilience of people and in their capacity for overcoming adversity than in becoming compliant and allowing bad things to happen at a very big scale. So I might be delusional. This might be my bias. I don't know. But I do believe that people genuinely are extremely resilient.
And to one final question, and this is only from my observations of who I work with and things like that. Why is it women are more open to coaching than men and wanting to work on their indifferences so that they can move forward? What is it about the woman's or the lady's mindset of I want to get past this more than men wanting to seek help?
I can answer this question in many different ways. I think one of them is still the toxic patriarchal thinking that is impacting men and making them afraid of openly discussing their mental health struggles, which is changing slowly but surely. I can see that it's changing, and I am incredibly happy for that. But I also believe there is a sort of biological component to it, because I don't know if you know this, but our brains are literally designed differently. So women, in between the two hemispheres of our brain, there is a place called the bridge of Broca, the Broca area, right? Women have that wider than men. And that happens to be the relationship highway, if you want. So whereas women have one of those big highways with 8 circulation lanes, which is why they can have so many relationships with their best friend and the best friend from childhood and the neighbor and Susie, the daughter of Mark, who is doing that with our kid on Sundays. These kind of relational highways, women can have multiple relationships, whereas men have a little bit of a footpath in which they only have one friend from childhood, and it's ride or die, and that's just one guy, and then maybe there's another 1 or 2 colleagues that they can tolerate having coffee with, right? But I think that's a biological component of how we are equipped to have relationships in principle, and then the layer comes of how we are educated and socialized, right? What do girls do after one first date? Do you know?
No.
We call each other and we talk the shit out of it. And then he said that, and you know what? And then he opened the door like this, and then he did that. So we talk and analyze everything that happened. What do guys do after one date? Yeah, it was okay. If they mention it, right? It's like they don't look at the quality of the relationship. So I feel that when we are kind of primed to analyze our relationships, that's when we become more self-reflective, more interested in, and how are you going to deal with that difficulty? And that's why I believe women are a bit more interested in these things than probably men. But as I said, I do believe it's changing, and I sincerely support and applaud that, because there is, statistically speaking, men suffer a lot more and a lot more severely from mental health struggles than women. And I think they should receive a lot more support in becoming comfortable to speak about that. And I also believe part of that is not more women therapists, but more men therapists.
I've said this plenty of times. Yeah, no, I've said this a lot. We need more men coaches. There's not enough men coaches. There is. No. And to be fair, most of my clients are ladies.
Yes, I can imagine that. But no, I have a colleague, by the way, in the UK. Simon Worth is his name. We recently had a very interesting chat, and his business is about organizing these groups and these kind of connections for men who are going in a transitional period of their life, post-divorce, post-breakup, changing jobs, the loss of a parent, where they can come together and, just as men, talk to one another and support one another to overcome those difficulties. And I sincerely feel like his work is so valuable. I really, really wanted to take off in a grandiose way, because I think he might be onto something that's very, very.
Let's get him on a podcast. If you know him, say to set up the introduction.
I will.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
I'm going to wrap up there because that was a fascinating talk. Adina, is there anything else you want to share before you leave?
No, it's been a pleasure, and I'd be happy to talk to you again because I feel that the vibes are vibing indeed. I feel we can have a really nice way, and I'm sure we can have a lot of good conversations. So I'd be
Oh,
happy.
absolutely. This did not go the way it was expected to go at all. It was so much deeper and so much better, which is a terrible English word. That's not even a good structure of language. And I'm passionate about language. Look, if there was ever an example of a podcast of if it's in the mind, it can be managed, this is it. This is genuinely it. Adina, if anybody wants to get you, send over your details. I'll put it into the podcast for you and things like that, and send me a picture of yourself. But if there's
Good.
ever a reason, if it's in the mind, it can be managed. This is it. As always, big love from Cuddy. Adina, it's been a pleasure, and I
Thank you. Likewise.
can't wait to see everybody on the next episode of the Mind Management Mentors podcast.